Welcome, my friends, to the Two Trees podcast. I'm John Dillon, and I'm here with world traveler Rosemary Moeller.
Hello.
And the great mind of all athletic situations, Martine Listener.
Hey, y'all. I was wondering where you're going with that. Like world traveler and then just like the guy
great
that
brain.
stays in his
And Martin.
basement all the time. But yes,
And
I love
besides
it.
that, I only went to DC. That's right here.
Have you been to other places in the world?
Yes.
Then you are a world traveler.
Okay. Well, I just flew back this morning from DC.
DC is not right here.
Humble
geographically
brag.
speaking.
I know. I know, right? It's just like, what can I say? I was on a plane today.
While visiting the District of Columbia.
Yeah, our
recently.
nation's capital. I was,
What kind of accent was that?
Yeah,
It was supposed to
our
be Forrest
nation's
Gump.
capital.
That was Forrest Gump.
close enough.
Alabama is disappointed in you.
I
Miss
know.
Rose.
Besides that, we're probably not allowed to quote movies either without,
I think Forrest Gump is fair game for all people of all times because of its classiness.
Yeah.
And once it gets so old, it's in the public domain. That's what I was trying to
Yeah, I
think.
don't think it's that old, but
It's probably older than Martin.
well, probably.
Close, I think.
That's all right. Did you have a good flight? I know there aren't any good flights, but was this one not as bad as most?
It was not good. Thanks for asking. It was a really short flight. It's only an hour flight there, but there was a lot of turbulence, and I may or may not have cried just a little bit. So I hate flying too. John and I equally hate flying, but I still do it because I am brave.
Woman of valor.
I am brave.
Who can find her?
Take note.
Anyway,
Beware of my awesomeness. Now, what were you doing in D.C.? Did you stop in and educate any politicians?
no, I don't feel qualified to do that. I was there with my son. He is getting married. And we never took him on a senior trip when he graduated a few years ago because, to be frank, he and I were not getting along. And I said, I don't want to spend a week with you. And he said, I don't want to spend a week with you. And so we tabled it.
So every parent-son relationship.
Yeah,
of all
mother,
time.
son, teenage. Yeah, probably can be. And so now that he's getting married, we called a truce on our feelings and are getting along much better. I'm pleased to report. And we decided it was time. And he wanted to go back to D.C. because he said he didn't appreciate it the first time because he was being a jerk face. And so this is a lot, guys.
Is
Sorry.
that a direct quote?
I believe so,
That's
actually.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's what he called himself. And so,
We get the
anyway,
point.
all that to say, we went and had a lovely time. His fiance went with us as well. We saw a lot of things we've never done before. I went to the Pentagon, which I haven't done. The tour was awesome. The guy that did it walked backwards the entire time.
I think that's impressive.
It was really cool, actually, because we're talking escalators and ramps and everything else. He never stopped talking and he never stopped walking backwards.
Did he have those sunglasses that had the mirrors on the outside?
No, he actually kind of looked like my son-in-law. It was very distracting. And so
Like Kyrell?
he did. He was tall and military haircut. So anyway, I probably
does
divulged.
not have
I've
a
probably
military
divulged enough about our Pentagon trip.
I'm glad you had fun.
We rated our Uber drivers, which was a lot of fun. We had a clear favorite. We got to go to Evensong at the National Cathedral, which I've never done. Highly recommend. Yeah, we were there and we saw it was going to start in an hour, and so we waited out in the Bishop's Garden until it started and just had a really good time. It was fun. We did other stuff too, but nobody wants to hear all about my vacation. So
No, I'm glad you got to go. Martin, have you been to D.C.?
In fifth grade.
Ah, yes. That pinnacle of your education.
The only thing I remember is there was a McDonald's in the Air Force Museum there, or the
National,
Air and Space Museum. And I did the thing where, you get a little bit of every flavor on your drink,
Oh, yeah?
all in one cup. That's what I remember about DC.
Oh,
You
well,
know-
I mean, that's an important cultural experience.
I can see why that made such an impression on you in our nation's capital.
Nation's
Nope,
capital.
I'm not doing that again.
Is that Forrest Gump?
That was Rose.
Thank you.
Well, we are taking a look at bridging the culture gap, helping modern readers read an ancient book. And we're taking a look at the earliest stories given to us about humanity, the beginning of mankind. As mankind has been pushed out of the garden, Adam and Eve's roles, the way they relate to each other, the way they relate to the earth, the way they relate to God, all of that is different on the outside of Eden. But mankind still is the image of God. We are made to walk with God. We are made to represent the kingdom of heaven before the generations that are going to come, before the angelic host, before the earth itself. Mankind is given a calling. And it's weird for us who obviously, we live in a world where there are bazillions of people, and we are used to community and to births and to deaths and to all of the history that's gone on, but the story of Adam and Eve coming out of the garden would have been a very strange experience, I think, for both of them, because the world that was normal to them is as abnormal to us as you can possibly imagine. Because remember, Eden is not just a really nice vacation destination like Washington, D.C.
Word.
Side note, were the cherry blossoms in bloom? Did
No,
you get to see?
they were done. If you wanted cherry blossom anything, though, the gift shops were rife with them. You could buy sweatshirts.
Well,
and
thank you,
coffee
Japan.
mugs.
We appreciate those. They are very lovely.
Yeah.
But Adam and Eve, coming out of the garden, what does it mean to be human living in a fallen world? What does it mean to be the image of God if you are no longer welcome in the temple of the Lord, to walk in the presence of God? And there are a lot of opinions, and honestly, some of them are, I'm going to say this nicely, they're well-intentioned caricatures of ideas that we kind of lump onto Adam and Eve, or sometimes to God. The idea that God can't be around sin, and so Adam and Eve are pushed out of the garden. Well, we have a problem with that because almost immediately we find God outside of the garden talking to sinners. We have the idea that Jesus spends a tremendous amount of time around sinners, that every human being who has ever prayed, ever, has been a sinner with the exception of Jesus. And we have God interacting with us on a very deep level. And so we recognize there is something different about humanity and the way we're relating to God. But when you oversimplify it into something like God can't be around sin, then you leave yourself problems. You back yourself into a corner that's beyond what the text can support.
So then I have a question that's not specific to that, but to ideas themselves. What do you think is the line between a bad idea, or not even a bad idea, an idea that you carry around with you from, I don't know, conversations or maybe sermons and your own interpretation of Scripture from a young age, that is a bad narrative, I should say, like God can't be around sin or whatever, versus out and out kind of like heresy that caused councils and laws and things like that came out of it, and ideas that we have used to shape our Christian narrative. Where do you see the difference there?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Where do you see the difference?
Do not throw my own question back at me. I am tired. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning.
Oh, I apologize.
Can I give you a few seconds to think
Yes,
while I give
do.
the sponsor of today's podcast?
Oh,
I
my goodness.
apologize.
I was trying to get a segue because you're like, here's some things that other people say, and we're going to get into our ideas in this episode,
Please
which is
pause
brought to
for
you
station
by...
identification.
Yeah, but this is really good because you've already seen the title of this podcast, this episode, when you clicked on it to listen to us. So the sponsor will roll right into that because today's episode is sponsored by Cains Quarry.
Yes.
Cains Quarry, prices so low they'll knock you out.
Oh,
Or
Martin.
worse.
Cains Quarry, thank you for bringing today's the longer pause I get,
Yeah.
the better I know the sponsor was. So anyway, heresy.
Wah, 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 wah.
Is it heresy or is it just a bad narrative, John? How
it's
do
a
we tell the
pun.
difference?
You've had lots of time to think about it.
No,
now,
I like it. So here's the problem that typically I think Christians face is you will not find Christians that I've ever met from just about any denomination that I've ever run across who don't believe they are reflecting biblical Christianity. And so you'll hear people say, you need to go to a Bible preaching church. And everyone thinks they go to one. Like, you need to get in a place where X, Y, or Z. And everyone just pats themselves on the back for having already accomplished this. The difficulty comes when we do not view the scriptures themselves as authoritative, but instead we view our way of approaching life as authoritative. When the Bible becomes proof texts to back up what I think and what I do, I then have a problem because I can take an idea like God throws Adam and Eve out of the garden. Why? Because they sinned. Therefore, God can't be around sinners. And then I have a real problem because in so many places in the Bible, God is around sinners. And so what you're dealing with there is an oversimplification of a fact. God is at war with sin, with the powers of darkness. That is a reality. But God is not limited in what he can do. He is almighty. And there are times where the Ark of the Covenant itself is in a pagan temple. It doesn't burst into flames. There's judgment that takes place, but there is a holiness that is beyond the narrative that we put onto these things.
So I feel like, and maybe this answers further your question, I have an example of something that came up in your sermon today of a way that this could be taken one way or the other. When you look at the overarching narrative of the Bible, there are certain truths like you just mentioned, like these are the truths. And then I feel like you should narrow down farther into the passage that you're reading. In Psalms 1, you referenced it today. It says, blessed is the man who does not stand in the way of sinners. If you listen to that from a purely English standpoint, if I'm standing in the way of something, I'm preventing it from happening. So why would I not want to stand in the way of a sinner? Like, hey, you're sinning. You need to stop sinning. I'm going to be the barricade that stands in your way. But that's not what it means. So if you just take that one sentence, you're like, don't stand in the way of sinners. Well, I should stand in the way of sinners. I need to help them stop.
And that's a moment where, and so this is going to get me in trouble. Okay. I am a big fan of the Bible in general. Love it. It is God's word. It is authoritative upon all Christians of all times. But if you are a bad reader, you will have problems interpreting your Bible. The idea that just because you read it and have a thought that means the Holy Spirit thinks, no, that means you think this. Take the time and read it and study it and pray about it and allow the text to lead you rather than the other way around. But especially in an age of the internet search, we have a tendency to go, okay, I want Bible verses that support this view, and then I'm going to line up everybody else as enemies of mine that I can straw man to death. And so you're going to find that there are a tremendous amount of Christian traditions, and I have disagreements with a lot of them, but I can also respect them as saying, okay, our differences are about this area, and I can see why you think that.
And so when I take that sentence and I look at it, and then I put it up against some of the truths that, the character of God and what he's asking us to do over and over again, it doesn't make sense that I'm reading it the correct way. And so then maybe look at it from a different angle and be like, oh, maybe it means stand in the way of sinners, being a joining in with them. I'm going to stand with them and raise the banner of the sinners. And it's like, oh, that's a better way of looking at it. And now it makes sense that the man will be blessed if he doesn't do that. And so that's the reading it, almost reverse engineering it. Like, this is the thought that I had when I read it, but does it match all these other things where God is saying this and showing his character and giving us laws and authorities? No, it doesn't. So I must be reading that wrong. Let me try it again. Let me look at it.
And I think so long as you come to that ending point, Martin, of a humbleness to be taught and for the word of God to say what it means, then I think you're in a good place.
When you look at all the man on the street arguments that people have, and they go up to this guy that knows the Bible inside and out, and they say, well, how come it says this? And it's like, that means blah, 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 blah. And then he says, well, what about reference to this chapter? Or what about reference to this verse? You can see where you can take it that way. You can interpret it that way, but God's character is the same throughout the entire Bible. And if you get to a spot where it's like all of a sudden God said, to heck with all the history that I've created, I'm going to do something brand new.
So a way to tell if you're in that kind of a conversation, especially this happens online or if you're around a group of guys who like arguing.
Actually, when we were on the mall this weekend, there was a man dressed up and he had a sign. He was dressed up, I want to say like Abe Lincoln. I did not look that carefully. Jeremy was very entranced. He had a sign that said free advice. And we just stared, and we were waiting on the kids. We were at the National Art Gallery, and we were sitting on the steps waiting on them to come meet us. And I was like, man, when Jesse gets here, I'm going to send him over to ask for free advice. And so when he got here, I was like, hey, go ask for free advice. He's like, you go ask for free advice. And I was like, I don't need advice. I give advice. Like, obviously, you go ask for free advice. Yeah. So I wonder, like you said, man on the street interview, I wonder if that would have been something you could have asked him, anything like that.
Oh, I'm sure that guy
Can God be around sin?
Yeah, he is all the time. Because God is omnipotent and omnipresent, and humans are definitely present. We are a problem. But you can tell if you're in one of these conversations typically because before, like if someone were to say, well, what about a Bible verse that says such and such, and you respond to it, they don't ever engage deeper into that idea. They bounce to another random thought that also backs up the point that they were trying to make. One of the ways to do this is to take your time in a text. Rather than proof texting your way through a series of ideas, read the text and the context of where you are, and really come away with it and say, okay, if I was just reading Genesis 1 through 5, what does it tell me about Adam and Eve and God? So far, we have seen human beings come into existence in two ways. One of them is God forms the earth and breathes into them the breath of life. And then God looks at that man and says, it isn't good. You're alone. And he halves the man and takes man and improves it into woman. That this is the culmination, if you want to think of it that way. This is what makes mankind complete. Paul is going to go on and say that woman is the glory of man. And so rather than, if you're just reading this, the idea that women are somehow lower on the totem pole doesn't fit within this text. You're loading this with assumptions that you're dragging in from other places. Rather than looking at this and saying, mankind and womankind are made to be one. Even when Satan comes in to tempt mankind, he does so as a pair. There is firstly the Azer, woman. I have to remove the defender if I am to get to Adam. And so Eve is singled out in the attack, and she is confused. She is deceived. Adam is not deceived. He is willingly engaging in a rebellion against the king. And then what happens is they are exiled. They are removed from the garden. And not in like a suggested kind of way. The word here is kind of for dragged out. They are forcibly ejected from the garden. And then in all of the pictures and things that really shaped my understanding of childhood, well, where did they go? Well, you would imagine, well, they just traveled far, far, far away and they wandered and who knows where. If it was me, I'd park right outside the gates. Like, how far away did you drive me? Just outside. Their goal, what they want, seems to be to go back. I want to be redeemed. I want to have a relationship with you, and God seems to want to have a relationship with us. He's just clothed us with the skins of animals, and he's talking to us. He's given us this promise that there's going to come a Redeemer. The serpent is going to be crushed. There is hope even in brokenness.
And even the idea that he banished them from the garden was a sympathetic act, so they weren't able to obtain the tree of life anymore. That was something
because
necessary.
Mankind's life is now it is affected by sin. It is going to continue to curdle and twist. And if mankind were to dwell eternally in that state, imagine an abusive relationship that is never ending. Like the world that we live in, it would be absolutely horrific.
So I do feel this kind of to my core when you said they got kicked out. Why wouldn't you just set up camp just outside of it? And I always think of this because my mom would always send me to my room and she would make the comment not to step 1 foot outside of my room. And she'll tell you this more than anybody. I used to stand with my toes at the seam of the carpet in my doorway and tell her I haven't stepped foot outside of my room, but she could see me and I could see her. It was that idea of like, I can't go any further, but I'm going to get as close as I can to where I want to be.
Do you see this in Oliver?
Oh, every day of my life.
This sounds like an Oliver move.
Every day of my life.
And I think when you begin to really think of it as real people and a real event and not just as flashcards and pictures from your childhood, and the reason they do that is because they're trying to depict exile. You can't depict exile if Eden is the background.
And it was
going
always
to destroy the whole ambiance of your painting.
It was always some barren land because the curse was that you're going to have to toil in the ground, and so it looked like desert in the on the
which
pictures.
works
like
great
wilderness.
artistically.
Yeah,
it seems to be though that Adam and Eve come out of the garden and they're okay. They are farming. They are raising animals. There is an abundance of life. But it is not what it was in Eden. The earth and Adam are no longer on speaking terms. It is opposed to him. And his relationship with Eve is also twisted, as all human relationships now are tinged with sin and pride and anger and lust and all of these different things that can destroy and derail a relationship. But now the world begins to grow. It says, and Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Now, to you, this is going to seem so obvious, of course, but this is the first time that a human being has ever come into the world this way. There have been two so far, and both of them were created by the hand of God. When Eve views what has happened in her womb, she doesn't see it as disconnected from the hand of God. She's not saying, well, this is the natural process by which babies are born. There have been 1 million babies born before, and I've seen rabbits give birth and animals give birth and even trees planted. Obviously, this is the same thing. When Eve sees family, she sees this as an extension of the hand of God. And so for us, looking at the family, we do not see this as simply the natural process in motion. This is now a way in which God is going to be involved in the lives of the children of Adam and of Eve. And so it says, now Adam knew his wife. Knew is, that means procreation. They are intimate. And it says she conceived and bore Cain. And what she says is, and this is interesting because we don't get lines from Adam anymore. We do get them from Eve. Eve says, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And so she sees herself fulfilling perhaps the promise that God had just given to them. There is going to come a child, and he is going to bruise or crush the serpent. It's going to bruise his heel, but you are going to crush its head. There's going to be conflict between your seed and his seed. And so she is primed for this, that there's going to be a struggle between her children and the children of the darkness. And the Bible talks a lot about this later. Jesus is going to say quite literally to the Pharisees, you are of your father, the devil. There's the whole Nephilim connection here. There's several different ways this can go. But to Eve, what she sees is this the promised one?
It's interesting that we take away like ability and intellect from Adam and Eve when it's convenient, and then we give them a bunch when it's convenient also. When we talked about the previous chapters, it's like Adam really wasn't a dummy, but then in this chapter, we just assume that Eve realizes, well, Jesus is coming, right? Like Cain isn't the answer. Abel's not the answer. Like, come on, you got to get through the generations. We're not even halfway through the Old Testament. This is Genesis 4. Like, what are you thinking? But Eve doesn't know. I mean, like you said, she's like flabbergasted of how this even happened. It's like, whoa, what is going on? And then she's like, oh, finally, my offspring. This is what he was talking about. Boom, boom, Satan's out. We're back in, right? I mean, that's the bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah, it's very
back
possible.
to how we were.
And throughout the Old Testament, you keep meeting characters who seem to be giving off messianic vibes. Is this the guy? Is this the one? Like you read the Moses story and you get a real clear indication like this might be it. It's not, but you don't know that except for you've read the rest of the book.
And so that's what I mean. So like we have to read this going through it. Like Adam and Eve did not know that he was not the guy. And so you would have the same assumption also when it says your offspring. Well, this is my offspring. She doesn't know she can do it again. Like, can I have another kid?
For
and
us,
another
like
kid, and
we're
another
used
kid?
to thinking of humanity simply through the lens of the physical creation. But Eve is more than a physical creation. She is a supernatural being enclosed in a physical body. That there is a lot of weirdness about humanity. And so she's looking at this and saying, isn't this wonderful? God has created again, and I was involved in the creation. This is something she has been the product of. Before it was Adam who was split, and he was part of this. But now the creation has not evolved, but it has changed. It is not from man that new life is coming. It is from Eve. And this is why Adam calls her Eve. When she leaves the garden, he gives her this new name. And then Eve begins naming children.
What a thought process of worship, though, from Eve. When you just said, like, I'm involved in this now. Like, that's what God calls upon your life all the time, is to join in with what he's doing. And so just that little snippet of what you just said is, I think, very important for our readers and everybody. It's like, Eve viewed this as a situation where she can worship God, not like, look what I have created. It was an idea of, look at what I can join God in doing.
Exactly right. And there's a holiness to children. Even when Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven, he says, you want to enter into the kingdom of heaven? Then be like a child. We are a culture that does not value innocence, and we should.
Well, I think based on, sorry, I'm going back a little bit here. You were talking about when they were driven out of the garden and they find themselves right by the gate and they stay there. You need to think for a minute, or I do, about the life they had been living inside the garden, which was a temple with spiritual service and communion with God. And that's a lot to have taken from them by their actions, where they find themselves like, basically you're moving from poetry into like prose. You find yourself stripped of certain things that you had, and I don't even know what I mean by that. Just the communion, the ability to see God and walk with him, and to do the acts of worship and spiritual service that you had been doing. And through your choices, you find yourself outside the garden, driven there. And you maybe just, I hate to use the word recalibrate because that just sounds dumb, but you're just sitting there maybe recalibrating and thinking and pondering all of the things that are no longer yours. And then there's this baby that's born, and about the holiness of children and the ability to create life, and the Lord has helped them to do this. And it's almost as though he's setting them on the next path, and this will be your work, and this will be the hope that drives everybody forward.
There has never been a baby. When Adam came around, he is a full-grown man. When Eve comes around, full-grown woman. What is this thing?
Well, and babies are just, they're the best. We have 2 little grandsons, and I was there when one of them was born. And I just think that was the first time, even though I have my own children. I mean, I was present at their birth. I think that was...
You were occupied.
Yeah, I was busy. I think that was one of the first times I saw the miracle of just life being brought forth, and it was so special. And I was just, that's what I was thinking about. And you guys were talking about Eve. I don't know.
But on that same plane of thought, like the idea of needing to supply for themselves, when they're in the garden, everything is taken care of as far as their physical bodies sustaining life. Now, all of a sudden, they are responsible for that. And it's not like you can go to the grocery store. Like, there is nobody else. I mean, maybe... Perhaps there's other theories out there, but if it's just Adam and Eve, and now all of a sudden we got to do that and a baby, like, wait a minute, now we have to feed this thing, and he's not eating the steak that I prepared for him. Like, I don't get what's going on. So, there is a lot of these things I think we just overlook, and I'm not saying we need to get into the weeds of how they supplied for the child, but on the same token, there is this toil factor and this confusion factor that if there'd ever be a place in time where reliance on God was needed more, would it not have been in the early days of exile?
I agree. And I am going to get into that a little bit here, because we oftentimes think of Adam and Eve as coming out of the garden. They're just morons. No idea how to do anything. What we find is that within their lifetime, they are farming. They are raising animals, and they're not eating the animals. They're either raising them for their wool or for their skins, for their milk. Like, they have figured out a lot of things that when we look at, well, this evolves slowly over time, over millions of years, and this, that, or the other thing. The biblical story is Adam and Eve came out of the garden intelligent, already knowing, having been taught, or at least shown these things by somebody.
Or having the intuition to, try to figure something out themselves.
Yeah, and so we find Eve, you mentioned earlier, moving from poetry to prose, but one of the very first things that Eve does is poetry. She looks at this baby, and she makes a poem about the baby.
Well, I think that part of the reason that, again, things don't just happen one boom, boom, boom. Like this, there's at least a 9-month gap here, let's just say. And the thing that you're going to see in common is that God was with them in the garden, and he's with them outside the garden, because she says, with the help of the Lord. And so they know that they're not left bereft. They're not left like unequipped or unsupplied or unaccompanied. Like, he's there with them too. Maybe not in the same way he was in the garden, I don't know, but he is present in their life on both sides, and that would sustain you.
I think we're used to thinking of, death as like the sign of the ending of things. But we oftentimes take that line that talks about women being saved and talking about through childbearing, and we're like, well, that's dumb. What would it have been like to truly see life come into the world again? It's not over. God is yet with us. And she looks at this child, and she does something really interesting. She says, I have gotten a man. So the Hebrew verb here is kana, and it sounds like the word Cain. It's a rhyme. It's a pun. It's kind of this moment where Eve looks at this and she says, do you know what? I am part of God's will yet. In Eden, I am not, but God is not done with me. And so you're looking at this story and you're thinking, wow, man, God is still there. There's this life-giving presence. She says, not only do you get this baby, but he gives you another one, and this one's name is Abel. And it says Abel is a keeper of sheep, and Cain is a worker of the ground. Now, the text tells us that they're not eating these animals. There are a lot of things you can do with an animal besides eat it. One of the things is that they happen to drop fertilizer, and so you may want them for the growing of plants. You may need them for the wool or the fur of any particular animal. They may have been milking the animals. There's any number of things, but right away we find humanity existing as both farmer and herdsman. Modern archaeology has a lot to say about this idea that perhaps, it was the herders who then a group of them broke away and became farmers. The biblical narrative is that backwards, that these two things coexisted from the beginning. And so we don't see this slow development of civilization that oftentimes is presented. And it's theory. We don't know because we weren't there, but we're looking at the world and we're recognizing it's been complex the whole time. We don't really find civilizations slowly forming. Instead, we look back in history and boom, civilizations, there they are, fully formed and rolling along. We're not really sure where they came from. Right now, really cool things are the stuff they're digging up around Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe. That's way earlier than anyone thought it should be there. And we're looking at these things and saying, how did these people go immediately to really advanced? Shouldn't it have just warmed up slightly? It didn't. The Bible discusses this. And so when we're looking at Adam and the children of Adam, one of them is a keeper of sheep, but Cain is described as a worker of the ground. Now, that sounds really nice, just obviously farming. But this expression is interesting because worker of the ground doesn't really encapsulate, there's the word.
Gotcha.
It says he is an Obed Adamah. So Adamah is the word for earth, and Adam is the name for man because man comes from the earth. But Obed is the idea he is a servant of the ground. He is to serve the ground. He makes it to grow. Just that picture, not of Cain reaping from the soil, but of Cain serving the earth and helping it to bring forth life like a lady giving birth, is a completely different way, at least in my mind, of how we view what the earth is doing. It's not mankind bringing forth a crop. It's man serving the earth, even though the earth is now kind of mad at us. It's not going to work with us in the way that we wanted it to. So he is carrying on his father's vocation. He is a tiller of the soil. But when you read the story of Cain, so he is this servant of the earth, he murders his brother with a stone.
Spoiler.
You guys aren't aware of this. Cain kills Abel. He is going to turn the earth into a weapon to devour other people. When God confronts Cain, God says, "The blood of your brother cries out to me from the ground." There is this defiling of the thing that Cain is supposed to be protecting and supporting.
Which is, I think, kind of Satan's, when the Bible talks about Satan later, about being the guardian cherub idea and how he takes away from what he was intended to do and turns it to be able to enrich himself. So if you're just looking at the darkness in general, that's what they want you to do. Talk about that Psalms passage as well. It's like, God has given me purpose and given me abilities to do things. How can I take that and gain for myself? And that's what Cain does. And then you'll find out what happens to him shortly.
Yeah, but I think you're right. There is an element here also of a calling. Mankind is supposed to make the world better. Abel is supposed to be a blessing on the sheep. Cain is supposed to be a blessing on the earth. Now that there are millions and billions of humans, you would assume that the earth is going to be millions and billions of times better off because look at all of the servants who are here. But we find the exact opposite, especially, I think, among Christians. We view the earth, and I don't know how many times I've heard people say this, well, it's all going to burn anyway, so we better X, Y, or Z. We're going to get our money's worth out of this thing. But if you were renting a home out and the renter was like, we're moving out next week, so it doesn't matter what we do in here, you would look at that renter as a horrible person. Why would you do that? Because the creation is the creation of God. He made it. There is something beautiful about mankind making the earth better. We seem to be a sore on the earth and the relationship with the animals and the creatures around us. We are out of sync with the way the world around us works. And so I'm not trying to get all political here, but I am trying to say that there is a very real element in which what it means to be human is connected to the way we interact not only with one another and to God, but with the other things that God has created. Does it matter how you treat your dog? Does it matter how you treat your grass? Does it matter how you treat frogs or birds or any of the other things that are out there? And the answer is yes, not just because God made them special, but because mankind was made to be a protector of things.
This reminds me of this class I'm taking, and he talks about the nature, the purpose, and the propriety of each thing. And the nature is what something is. The purpose is what it's created for, and propriety is when it interacts with the things around it in the way that you're supposed to. So there's if you misuse your nature or your purpose or your propriety is a toxic way to interact with the things and people and places and things around you, then that's when you have disorder of every kind, And so that's a massively simple overview of it. But as you were talking, that's what I was thinking about with the way that you interact with the earth and the nature, your nature by God, the purpose you're created for, and to take it and ruin something that he has given you is to show that you have not acted with propriety towards that thing.
It's interesting because as soon as sin comes into the earth, or comes into the world or whatever, Adam breaks the relationships that he has with the two closest entities next to him. He blames God and he blames the woman. He says it's your fault and the woman's fault that I partook of the apple or the fruit, and that's why we have this. And so then you have the same thing replayed again in Cain, and you'll have the same thing replayed and replayed and replayed. But it's amazing how humans have an uncanny ability to take the best part of their life and flip it to make it the biggest stain on their life. Cain has the ability to serve the ground and has and that's what he's designed to do. He has the ability, he has the gifts that he needs to make this something when there's a curse that says you can't do that. The ground is not going to work with you. And then all of a sudden God's like, okay, you can make this happen. And he takes it, and instead of propelling mankind forward into having an ability to work with the ground, similarly to how they had it in the garden, maybe all the way back, he says, I'm going to use the ground now that I can manipulate it and get what I need from it.
Yeah, I believe that there's a spiritual statement in growing things, that this is broken and I will not allow it to remain broken, that the earth is cursed, but I will still remember what we were made to be. And it can still be done. It's much harder to do, but way beyond just the utilitarianness of growing peppers for your salsa is the idea of just growing a thing for the joy of growing it. We're living in a world right now, especially in Western culture, where people are very worried about the earth, our resources, all of those things. And it feels like Christians are of the opinion that it doesn't matter. Well, we don't need to care for any of this anyway. It is a great testimony to the lost world when they see Christians treating the physical creation as though it was really created by God. When I go into a museum or into an art museum or something, I'm looking at masterpieces, and not one of them is as special as any of the living organisms that God has made. There's something beautiful and living. There is life in these things, and cultivating them is a way of giving glory to God. There is I think, something almost unattainable through words that is done through gardening. And it is a very beautiful means of expressing a love for something other than self.
Even if it's just something beautiful, like Erin and I had to split some hostas, and I brought him over and she was planting them and stuff. And these things are completely useless except for beauty. They're not, it's not like we're trying to grub out a living from the dirt or anything like that. We just want things to be beautiful and to have green spaces and have something to care for that actually grows and loves you back.
But also put yourself in the mind of Cain at this point. The recollection that Adam and Eve have about what is supposed to come from the ground, right? The knowledge of what they have is the garden. We want what we have now to be like the garden. Well, the garden has everything growing abundantly, the idea of simply utilitarianism where like, hey, put the potatoes in now so we'll have something to eat over winter time.
Right.
It was not in the mind of Cain and Adam and Eve at the time of exile. Yeah, there is a necessity for food and for, sustainability of physical life, but if you think that gardening and groundwork ends at just what can we put in the freezer so we won't die over the winter time, that's a completely modern idea, in my opinion, when you're looking at we need to recreate the Garden of Eden to the point where just everything is abundant all the time. That is a much larger task than just make sure we have enough onions in our rows.
Yeah,
to be
it's
able
a
to eat.
different worldview entirely. And I'm not saying you can't do this through gardening for food. Like you can absolutely do this. Hospitality is a huge means of giving glory to God. I'm saying they're interconnected. That this isn't an area of life that is the sole dwelling place of the liberal mind. This ought to be central to the children of Adam, period. When you see a place, there's a reason. Like some of the people who appreciate nature most that I have met are like deer hunters or duck hunters. They're people who are like good old boys, and they'll go out and they'll be like, man, there's nothing like being in the woods. And they're going to describe it to you, and it's a religious experience. As they're describing these things in a way that other people who would say, they're much more cultured or classy would fail to measure up to what they are seeing in the creation around them. And so when Adam and Eve and then Cain and Abel are living outside of the garden, they do not view themselves as receivers, but as givers. They still retain a calling to serve.
And that's important to have that understanding of what their worldview looked like, because in a few short, verses, Cain is going to take a rock to the backside of his brother's head because God says, what you have done out of the ground is not enough. And we always think of that from the flannel graph as like, oh, he had some tomatoes and a few, things of lettuce. And God said, that's not what I'm looking for. But that's, again, the idea that we are just using it as the fruits and vegetables that are produced. But Cain is saying, I'm trying to recreate the garden. If we have that mentality, and then God says, nah, I don't like it.
Well, let's talk about that idea for a minute. So it says in verse 3, would one of you guys read that verse?
I'll do that. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard.
Now, this is a moment where many people make an error in assuming that this happens after Moses is given the law. There is, as far as we know, no instructions given to Cain and Abel about what to do, why to do it, or when. What they are doing, though, is they are maintaining their calling as priests. In the garden, they are serving the Lord in one way. Now they are outside of the garden, and it seems to be that Cain and Abel did not view themselves and say, well, that was for mom and dad before they got fired, but now we live in a new neighborhood, we've got new things to do. They don't seem to have eyes turned away into the wilderness, but eyes that look back to the garden.
I'm sorry, can we go back to mom and dad got fired?
Well, that's what happened, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
I could understand this. And so what they do is they each bring from their treasures. Cain is a servant of the ground. He brings forth the fruit of the ground. Abel is a shepherd. He is a herdsman. He brings of the flock. And there is nothing in the text that tells us that God doesn't like vegetables and does like meat. As a matter of fact, you kind of get the opposite, having read up to this point, that if somebody is acting weird, it's Abel killing an animal and not just plants, because we've seen already people are eating plants, they're using plants. Abel is doing something odd here. But when you look at this, you find an ongoing calling of priestly service, that the children of Adam are intended to be servants of the Lord. Even today, all Christians share in the priesthood of the believer. You have the ability to serve God, to speak to God. His ears are open to you. You are limited merely by your creativity and your desire to dedicate and to pursue ideas and things for the glory of God. Paul says whether you eat or you drink, do it to the glory of God. So like options are wide open as to what you can do. They are doing sacrifice.
Well, not to be too on the nose, but they have their own relationship with the Lord, right? It looks like right away. They are not just resting on their parents' relationship with the Lord, which is something that isn't sometimes a natural outcome. It was a shock to me as a parent that my children needed to have their own relationship with God that I didn't provide for them. I know that sounds silly. Like I knew that in theory, but in practice, it was very difficult for me to kind of cut my own cord with them spiritually and leave them, to the will of the Father and to grow their relationship with Him. And that's what it looks like Cain and Abel are doing here.
Yeah, there is a problem. And there is this idea, and it happens because people want to read the crucifixion story into this story. And it is present, but not in the way that it's overly simplified. Without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins. Well, there's nothing in this text that says they're trying to get their sins forgiven. It seems to be you have two people who are trying to praise God. That not all of the prayers that you pray are for forgiveness of sins. Not every time that you do something is to try to earn forgiveness for something. And so we are reading into the story an assumption about what they're doing and about how they're supposed to go about it. But even after Moses gives the Torah, there is lots of sacrificing of wines and of grains and of the fruits of the earth. And so one of the things that you'll hear is the earth was cursed and Cain offered the stuff from the earth and God hates that. And that's really weird because all through the rest of the Old Testament, people are offering things from the ground.
But not only that, the banana slugs told me that dirt made my lunch. So even the beasts of the field are eating the stuff that came from the cursed dirt. And then they are producing fat and stuff.
Sidebar, for those of you who do not know, the Banana Slugs are a famous local children's band, famous throughout all of Ohio and having entertained elementary school children all over the world.
They're from California,
but they are famous.
But they came here a lot. But anyway, it's still the same idea. If you're saying like, well, the earth was cursed, so of course the vegetables are cursed. Well, the vegetables go into the stomach of the calf that was then sacrificed. And so the blood and the life-sustaining force came from the cursed dirt. So
yeah, this is an artificial problem. Cain's offering is not rejected because it is of the earth. There's nothing in the text that indicates that. As a matter of fact, the opposite is here. Just to show it to you, this comes out of the book of Leviticus. This is Leviticus chapter 2, verses 1, 2, and 3.
And I don't know where that is.
Oh, well, not a problem. I will read it to you.
It's on the super secret
When
outline.
anyone brings a grain offering as an offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. He shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it and bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, and he shall take from it a handful of the fine flour and oil and all of the frankincense, and the priest shall burn this as a memorial portion on the altar, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But the rest of the grain offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is most holy part of the Lord's food offerings. It is pleasing to the Lord, even though it's a plant, even though it's frankincense, even though it's oil. It is a way of worshiping God. Now, what does Abel think? I don't know. Abel has no speaking lines. What does Cain think? That we know. Cain is very angry because God has regard for Abel's sacrifice and not for Cain's. That tells me that there is a problem. It also is going to tell me that apparently God is present at the sacrifice. Is that a physical? I don't know, but definitely Cain seems to be having a conversation with God and knowing that it's God right away. So again, if God has a problem with sinners, I have a problem here because this is the sinful son of a sinful man outside of the garden, and he was so bad that his offering isn't even accepted. There's a problem here. Let's pick it up in the very next verse. So Cain was very angry.
Yes, he was. So Cain was very angry, and he fell and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it.
So this is the conversation. God does not say to Cain, don't you know that you're not supposed to sacrifice plants? He says, I'll tell you what the problem is, Cain, and the problem is your heart. You are not in a good place. You are willfully walking in sin. And the implication is he has a hatred that's growing inside of him. It says Cain was very angry and his face fell. That's a very Hebrew idea of the smile just drops away. There is no more hiding what Cain truly is. And the Lord says to Cain, why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will your offering not be accepted? And the implication here is that it doesn't really tell us what's going on in Cain's heart, but Cain certainly knows what it is. There is nothing here that gives me a glimpse into Cain's story. Just like there are moments in my life that are not part of yours. There are moments I like when John is talking about, or Peter is asking about John, and Jesus is like, that's not your story. What is it to you if that happens to him? But I'll tell you what will go on here. I like the part in the Chronicles of Narnia where Aslan says to the children, that's not your story. I tell no one any story except their own. What we see here is the broad edges, but there is a respect and a privacy that is left for Cain here. But there is also a warning that exists to all of humanity ever. And what he says is that there is an enemy who is trying to eat you. There is a predator desiring to destroy you. And with the prophecy that he just gave to Eve, like a couple of paragraphs ago, we know who this is. This is the serpent. This is the darkness.
Can we not just look at verse 6 and see how that's the exact same way that God treats Adam and Eve when they're in the garden?
Yeah.
Like God knows what's going on, and he says, well, Cain, why are you so angry? And why has your face fallen? As if he doesn't know the answer to it. And yet Cain basically does the same thing that Adam and Eve do, right? Like they're hiding from God in the cool of the day, and they're like, that wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Cain kind of does the same thing. He's like, I'm not mad. Like, what do you mean? I don't have this bitterness rooted in my heart. I don't have this hatred for my brother. I don't have any of that stuff that you haven't said yet, but you were thinking it. I know you were. And so it's just, again, how mankind falls victim into its own trap so many times over and over again.
Yeah, it's describing an intelligent evil that desires the destruction of the children of Adam. Remember, Satan is a murderer from the beginning. That the darkness desires the destruction of the kingdom of God. His will is contrary to that of humanity. And when it looks around, it sees in Cain a victim, something that can be possessed, taken, devoured. And God speaks of it like a twisted beast. It says there is...
But again, I want to make sure that I made the point, because I don't think I just made the point I was thinking in my head, which was the idea that God has the gracious ability to reach out to him. Like, it's a sacrifice, didn't really go well, but, hey, let me just give you a little heads up here, Cain, of what's going on. And I'm going to ask you a question, let's have a conversation about it. Like, God, people think the God of the Old Testament is just the sledgehammer that brings down judgment whenever he has the ability to. Like, he's up there waiting for you to screw up so I can just, bam, knock you in the face. Before Cain does the big screw up, he's like, let's have a talk. Let's converse about this.
And not to break ahead in the story, but even after Cain does these things.
Where is your brother?
Cain is defended by God and protected. You find God acting as a protector, but what you find is in humanity, we are predator. We are devourers. We are not those who protect others. James says it really well. He says, pure and undefiled religion looks like caring for the widow and the orphan. That's what it looks like. You want to know what a religious person looks like? That's the goal.
But you can see the teaching mentality that God is trying to portray here. Same way when you see your son and the cookie jar is half empty and you say, where are the cookies? Like, you know where the cookies are. What kind of question is that? It's a dumb question to ask. The child ate the cookies. Like, that's what happened. But for a gracious parent trying to teach their child something, where did the cookies go? That gives them an ability to, repent for what they did. Show that you have concern or show that you have remorse.
Yeah,
Same
you're
way a
picking
judge,
picking this right up. I mean, doesn't he do this with Adam and Eve? Where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you? It's the same thing here with Cain.
And it's the same, like a judge today, when you go to court, which I work at the court, they basically ask you, like, did this happen? And the person can say, yes, I was guilty of this charge. And I'm sorry that I was speeding, but I was in a hurry or I had to use the restroom or whatever it is. And then the judge will be more passionate towards those that are, honest and open and repent. Allow them an opportunity to come back into good graces with the state, but in God's idea, back into the garden, back into the kingdom.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time that Cain's ever sinned. Like, he's a human like everyone else. At least this is the assumption that you make. But what you get here is a direct warning from God. He says, if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and it has a desire for you. You must rule over it.
So I have a question here that has to do with, I don't know if I want to call it the order of operations.
Sure.
It says, if you do well, you'll be accepted. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. It sounds like the sin is not what's causing the not doing well.
It's not.
It's waiting to see what you do.
That's right.
To give sin a personality here, which I'm not sure if I should or not. But it sounds like that's
God
what it
is.
is. Right. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it. So what is it that is governing the person that's sitting there getting ready to make the choice if it's not sin or the Lord?
Yeah, it is the desire of Cain. And this is where Martin and I got into this the other day about what does it actually mean to be tempted. There is an intelligent evil desiring to sift Cain. Jesus talks about this with Peter. He says, Satan desires to sift you like wheat. It desires to devour and destroy you. The Bible talks about intelligent evil, but it also talks about it in the sense of what is your desire? When Adam and Eve look at the fruit, there is a thing, a serpent, pushing the conversation forward, but there is also the will of humanity that must either decide, I will honor the king, or will decide, I will define right and wrong for myself. This is what's being discussed now. And so which is it? It's both. It doesn't say Satan, and it doesn't say your will. It uses the broader term of you are willingly engaging in a rebellion, Cain. And it is crouching at the door. Now, here's the question. Are there doors? Are there buildings? Apparently, yeah. This is a word that Cain seems to understand. Is there a gate of Eden that the cherubs are guarding? The world is not just fields and forests. There seems to be civilization here. And this idea of dangers in the darkness is something that Cain is aware of because he has been dwelling outside of the garden. But the problem is that the problem or the danger isn't the darkness out there. Cain is the predator. Cain is the danger. He becomes the thing that destroys his family and his brother. Are you following me?
I am. I just have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
In the New Testament, you were talking about Peter being sifted like wheat, but think of Judas at the table with Christ. And Christ says, the one that I dip and hand it to is the one who'll betray me. And he dips and reaches out, and Judas takes it. And it says at that moment, Satan enters into him. So
That's right.
It's sort of the same thing played over again. Like it's like that moment of, let me find it here. If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, but you make the choice. So
it will overpower you. But you are the one who decided that this was what you wanted. The idea that there is a neutral power, and that's you. There's God, and there's the devil, and then there's me somewhere in the middle, and I'm the nice guy. And these guys, C.S. Lewis has this great quote. I don't remember which. I think I do. I think it's in Out of the Silent Planet. He says, every moment in time is claimed by God and counterclaimed by Satan. I don't remember. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think it's from that book, but it is Lewis. And he's right, that we don't have neutral acts. Either they further our own kingdom or they are moments of worship of the kingdom of heaven, down to whether I eat or I drink. Cain has brought a sacrifice, but not to worship God. He seems to have some other motive in his heart, And God is calling him out and saying, please do right, and it will be accepted. And if you don't do it, you need to know you are being hunted. And Cain refuses. We'll get into his story next time. But what I want you to see is that God desires a relationship even with the fallen sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, that he is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the God of gods, mighty and awesome.